All right, so today we're going to talk about that B word. No, not that one, budgets. Budgets are so critical, and I know sometimes they get a bad rap, but budgets aren't just a spreadsheet. They can give you good insight and tell the story of your organization in a great way. So today we're going to talk about 4 tips that you can use to help make budgeting better and work better for you. So let's get into this. Hey guys, welcome back to the Nonprofit Missionary Podcast. We're not afraid to talk real strategy, money, and real mission impact without all that fluff here. So my name is Ken McQuiller. If this is the first time you're meeting me, great. Hopefully you will subscribe. And I've been doing grant writing for about 7 years with faith-based nonprofits, and I'm here to just help you navigate the crazy world that is the nonprofit world so that you don't have to worry so much about raising funds, and you can really focus on what you do best, and that is making that real mission impact. So today we're going to talk about budgets. And I know for some people, budgets is very out there. It's, well, I don't do math stuff. It doesn't have to be that complicated. I want to talk about 4 different truths that can help launch you into having a very impactful budget. So let's get into this. Number 1, foundations have opinions and spreadsheets. So every funder doesn't just want to know your impact, and they don't want to just see those numbers. A lot of times they want to see it in their own format. What does that mean? A lot of foundations have specific guidelines on how they want their budget to look. Some will have a specific spreadsheet that they have that you just fill out, and some will ask you for specific aspects of your budget. Like they only want to know about what they're paying for. Or within the project, they want to know which dollars are being allocated to them. Or they may want to know the project as a whole, or the organization as a whole. So I think one of the most important things before we even talk about the technicalities of creating a budget or anything like that is you always want to make sure that you're checking with what the foundation wants. Trust me, if you're confused, let someone know in that foundation. Please just talk to them. I just want to say, the only time that you talk to them shouldn't be whether or not you get an award. Have a conversation with them. A lot of smaller foundations will have grant writing meetings or how they want things to go, and they will go step by step on what that looks like. Don't skip those meetings. Yes, I know they can be boring and annoying, and if Barb asks another question about what the budget looks like, even though she's been answered 8 times, you just want to punch the camera in the face. But at the same time, it's important to be there. It's important to understand what they're looking for. Because one of the biggest things for foundations, you want them to see what they're looking for. You can have the greatest impact, you can have the greatest organization, but if you're not giving to them in their language, in the way that they're looking, they're going to question whether or not you're actually going to do what you say you're going to do. So first, you do have to build like a solid internal budget. Like you should have a set budget. It should also be typically approved by your board of directors. But at the same time, make sure you fit what the funder is looking for. That's so important. All right, truth number 2. Don't make it up, build it up. When it comes to budgeting, it can be very, very complicated and you're like not sure where to start. I want to encourage you to start with your activities list. So as you are looking to get into the grant world, you're going to want to have an activity list. You're going to want to have a list of things that you do. Step by step, every single thing that you do in your program. I'm going to use our after school program as an example. I'm not going to use the same numbers or anything like that, but just using that concept of we're doing a nonprofit for an after school program and we're looking for grant funding for it. You got to go step by step on what you're doing to make this program happen. So step 1, do you have like some kind of curriculum? Your program director will then create the curriculum. That's your first activity. With every activity that you have, there is a cost attached to it. There'll be some probably personnel costs attached to it. There might be some equipment costs, supplies, indirect costs. Like there's going to be a lot of different costs that are just associated with every single activity. So with that first example of designing curriculum, if you have a program director that's doing that, you have to pay the person to do it, right? I'm assuming that they're not doing it for free if they're called your program director. So however many hours a week, or if they're salaried, whatever it might be, that's your first activity. So as you're building your budget under personnel, program director, $35,000. Boom. That's your first line item. Now, curriculum. What are they doing with the curriculum? Are they purchasing a curriculum and then kind of adapting it to their own? Are they making it from scratch? What does that look like? So let's say they're purchasing a curriculum, and that curriculum costs $1,000. Supplies, curriculum, done. And you go through every single activity that you have to do. And as you're doing this, be as weird and dumb as possible. What do I mean by that? You don't just want to... You want to act like no one has heard of what you're doing before. You want to go like that step by step. You want to go to the point where if somebody were just walking in and running your program, they can do it based on the activity steps that you have. Don't assume anything. Don't assume that, well, for an after-school program that you need students. How are you recruiting those students? Are you going to the schools? Are you doing flyers? Are you doing social media posts? Are you boosting those posts? All of those different things are going to have different costs attached to them. So for each one of those line items, create a good activity, a list of activities, and then for each line item, look at what it's going to cost. Look at what you need to do. Maybe it's securing a space. We'll talk about indirect costs kind of here and there, but that would be considered an indirect cost, but it still is a part of the cost of what you're doing. Are you transporting the kids? Transportation is a cost. Are you feeding the kids while they're there? Snacks cost money. Even if you don't actually pay it, you want to make sure that you're including it in there. Now, a lot of nonprofits deal with in-kind donations, whether it's volunteer hours, whether it's donation of food, clothing, whatever other supplies you might have. You still want to include what it would cost to make it happen, because it does really, it makes a difference. When you look at, yes, you may only spend $25,000 a year on actual cash, but it costs $60,000 to run your program. It's a huge difference. So you want to make sure that you're building it and including every single potential line item. As you're going through your activities, after you go through and you're like, okay, I know this is everything that I have, then go through and ask, what does each of these things take to actually run? What is the cost behind it? The personnel costs, the supply costs, the equipment costs, any indirect costs like rent or utilities or whatever. And then once you have that, you're building a good realistic budget. You're not just kind of making it up as you go about, because sometimes that's what a lot of nonprofits do. They just kind of make up something, or one budget for one foundation grant will look different from another. Just keep it consistent, build it all up. And if you have a set budget, because what I do is I created a budget for each of the nonprofit clients that I have, and it's in a folder, usually that organization budget 2025. And if I can just send that over, great. But sometimes, like in point number 1, sometimes foundations will have different formats and whatnot. Just, if you have it there and you have it saved, it's great. Also, it's always good to have this approved by your board. Some places will say that it needs to be a board-approved budget. So once again, be careful of that. But also, like, if the board knows what you're doing, it makes it easier to try to do what you're trying to do. So don't make it up. Build it up. Truth Number 3, let's be real over being ridiculous. Now, we're not talking about monopoly money here. This is actual real money. We want to be careful that we're not over budgeting or under budgeting. If we're under budgeting, we're just over promising in disguise. If we're over budgeting, we're acting like we're bigger than we are. We want to be as realistic as possible. So if your executive director is making $35,000 a year, like, yes, you would love to see that higher, but don't say they're making $75,000. If you are trying to do an after-school program and you think it's going to cost you $80,000 in supplies, it's just not going to look good. You want to make sure that you have a realistic number. Now, as far as supplies goes, I know sometimes it can be a little bit complicated because you're not really sure what exactly to put on there. Because especially if this is a new program or it's a big jump from what you normally do, it's hard to give a good estimate. For our coffee shop, the first year, it was really hard to make a budget because we didn't know how much traffic we were going to have. We didn't know how much volume we would have needed of everything. It was just really, it was challenging. But then once you have the data, it makes it a little bit easier. So it is important to just make sure that you, number one, keep track of how much things are costing throughout the year. It's just general good accounting, but you want to have good, realistic numbers. And if you're looking at, let's say, snacks for an after-school program, you can kind of give a good guesstimate based on the number of students you have. You can go on Amazon and see how much a case of Goldfish crackers costs. Or if you're doing like water bottles or whatever you might be doing. Most things you can at least get an accurate cost if you're just looking it up on like Amazon or Walmart or Sam's Club, whatever. Also, you probably could use ChatGPT to help you with that and say, like, I'm doing an after-school program for 20 students, 5 days a week. How much would snacks cost for the full year? I'm sure that it could do it. Actually, let me see if I can try that. All right, so I put that in ChatGPT. I'll just read this here. I'm doing an after-school program for 20 students for 5 days a week for 40 weeks. How much did I budget for snacks? And it gave a full breakdown, and it gave a suggested budget range of $5,000 to $6,000. And it gives you flexibility for occasional higher cost items like fresh fruit and milk, special celebration days, and price fluctuations. So if you don't want to like scour Amazon, you could just use AI and kind of give you a good estimate. This is one of those instances because I know I did an episode on AI a little bit back. Maybe I will tag it here if I can do that. Maybe. I know I did an episode on AI previously, but I think it is important to at least, in ways like that, I think AI can really save us time. Because if you're trying to estimate costs like that, just ask ChatGPT. Or you get some utilities, things like that. Some of that is really hard to estimate ahead of time. I understand that. But what I want to say is you want to be realistic. You don't want to be ridiculous about it. Stop pretending in general when we're actually making a budget. Stop pretending that we're just running it on good vibes or the volunteer fairy dust or the Holy Spirit will figure it out. The Holy Spirit has given us the knowledge to figure it out. And I think sometimes we try to dismiss bad planning for just like doing what God has called us to do. If God has called you to lead this organization, part of leading the organization is budgeting properly. Part of leading the organization is creating realistic budgets that you make sure that you can make. Because people are relying on you. Not just the grant makers to give you a good thingy, to give you a good application thingy. Wow. but also your staff is relying on you. Also, your community needs you. So, you can't just kind of take a wild guesstimate. Trust me, grant makers can kind of tell that. There's been a couple times where I just kind of took a wild guess because I didn't know. And there was one where I was like meeting, it was like a grant committee. They do like a one-on-one before they have their big meeting. And they said like, so like, where did you come up with that number? And I'm like, oh no, I don't know. It's hard to do that. And so then afterwards they were gracious enough to adjust it. But also you just got to be careful with it, because not everyone is that gracious. Not everyone will actually help you in that way. So let's be real. Truth number 4. One stream equals one slip away. Do you have one primary source that gives you a lot of the funding that you have? Whether it's an individual, whether it is a foundation, whether it's a church. Now, I don't want to sound big doomy and whatnot, but there is a good chance that at some point that won't be there. We think it's very brave and courageous, and we try to really like kiss at the feet of whoever that might be, whether it's the foundation, whether it's the individual, whether it's the church. But things can still change. It's not brave to do that. It's not courageous to do that. It's dangerous. A foundation can change their priorities just like that. We've seen it all the time. In the 7 years that I've worked here in Cleveland, a lot of the foundations, they change CEO, president, executive directors, whatever their title is. They change those pretty quickly. I wouldn't say there's like a high turnover rate, but they do change. And sometimes with that change begets different focuses. And sometimes current events or things that are going on, whether in your city or in the world, can change what they focus on. A lot of foundations changed their focus to more social justice causes after George Floyd in 2020. Things change. People die. I've had donors that passed away that were regular givers up until the day that they died. And I commend them for that, and I thank God for them. You have people that they change their giving for whatever reason, whether it's a job reason, whether it's they want to focus on something else reason, whether it's they've become a board member for another nonprofit, whether it's a more contentious relationship thing. There are so many different reasons why people leave and why people won't fund you. But what I want to encourage you to do is make sure that you have a consistent and a diverse funding stream. What does that mean? When I say diverse funding stream, I don't mean you have to get funding from Black people, white people, Asian people, Hispanic people. Although that'd be great. But you need to have funding from multiple sources. You want to have funding from individuals, like I talked about last week. Funding from individuals is bigger than any other source. You want to have funding from grants, multiple grants, not just one. A lot of grant makers won't give grants to organizations that have, where they're doing all of the funding. So let's say your program costs $20,000, they're not going to give you a grant for $15,000. They might, but you just want to be careful. And also earned revenue opportunities, such as if you're selling merch, if you charge for your services, that would be considered earned income. Sometimes if you're talking like in the mental health field, sometimes in the childcare field too, earned income can look like billing from Medicaid or from the childcare vouchers, things like that. But it's still earned income. The only caution I would say with earned income is don't make it too much of your funding stream. At least 33% of your funding should come from public funding, that is donations, grants. Anything lower than that could put yourself in danger of losing your 501c3 status, so just be careful of that. But you want to mix it up and have a good playlist. You want to have a bunch of different players in the game. What also helps is, number one, grant makers love to see that. They love to see, especially depending on your area, depending on your cause, they want to see certain foundations that have a buy-in. They want to make sure that like your local foundation's actually taking care of you. Because if they're not, they're going to wonder why. And sometimes like foundations are sometimes a little bit of a tight-knit circle, so they'll ask around. So you just want to make sure that you have that type of funding. But then also, sometimes if you have those different people that are a part of it, it'll encourage more people to give. And you'll have networks kind of coming together and wanting to do more collaborative things. The bottom line is money loves movement. You need that diversity to thrive. You don't want just one person with most of the funding power, because also what ends up happening is that one person has a lot more power than you realize, and you don't want them to do that. You don't want them to, let's say you're in the faith-based arena, you don't want a foundation to be like, no, don't talk about Jesus like that. If you do, we'll pull your funding. Because then if they're funding most of you, then you're kind of in a rock and a hard place. So, just in general, before I get to Confessions of a Missionary, be flexible for funders. Build from your actual activities and spread out your income streams. Stay real, and I want to encourage you, just continue to do what God is calling you to do. Just stay on track. I know budgeting can be hard, and if budgeting is just way, way too much for you, I want to just encourage you with two things. Number one, don't give up. Don't overthink it. Ask for feedback. Do all of that stuff. But then also, hit me up. nonprofitmissionary@gmail.com. I would love to help you out there. All right, so as I wrap this up here with Confessions of a Missionary, I wanted to talk about, to me, what is the biggest trait that affects whether or not people stay in ministry. Now, I've been in ministry now 9 years. I've been to 2 different Bible schools, so I'm friends with a lot of different Bible school graduates and everything like that. And I think there's I've seen the gamut. People that are very much fireworks versus bonfires, where they're big and showy for a minute and then they disappear, versus those that slowly come along and then all of a sudden it's like whoosh. I've seen people really, unfortunately, flame out in ministry, get burnt out in ministry, get divorced because of ministry. And I just want to say, I think there's a lot of different traits that I could talk about. But I think the number one trait of what can be a good predictor of whether or not someone will make it in ministry isn't whether or not they are a dynamic preacher. It's not whether or not they're a great people person. It's not whether or not they speak in tongues better than everyone else in their church. It's one thing, in my opinion, and that's consistency. Living a consistent life, to me, is one of the things that I see in a lot of the people that make it. What does that mean? What do I mean by consistency? Consistency in showing up for ministry. I'm not saying after this is too hard, I'm just going to give up, because there are a lot of people that do that. So showing up when it's hard, showing up when they don't want to show up, but also being consistent in every aspect of their lives. So when someone is in the church, they're the same person when they're at home. They're the same person when they're with their friends. Because I see it a lot with so many different things. For example, from the pulpit they might preach, drinking any alcohol is not okay. And I'm not getting into a theological debate on whether or not that's true. But then, at home, they don't mind drinking alcohol. That's not a consistent life. And depending on your denomination, you're not allowed to do that. or they're the hardest working person in the church. They're there before anybody else gets there and they're the last person to leave. But they're not consistent in their home life in the same way, where they're working hard for their spouse, for their kids. It's an issue. It's not consistent. Or they're talking about how important it is to be generous in their tithing and offering, or giving to missions, or giving to a project. But when it comes to their own finances, they're not that way. They're not tithing. They're not giving to missions. They won't even consider giving to missions. Consistency is so important. More so than having the skills to do what God has called you to do, because you'll learn those. Regardless of where you are, you'll eventually get to the point where you can figure it out. But consistency is key. So just be consistent. Show up for the people that really need you. Show up for your church. And most importantly, show up for God. Because that's the other thing, is your devotional life. If you're consistently preaching from the Word of God, but the only time that you're preaching, or the only time you're looking at the Word of God is for preaching, then it's an issue. Do a devotional. There's a lot of free ones out there. Even if you don't like them, read something. Pray. Don't just be praying for people. Pray just to pray. So with that, I just want to encourage you to be consistent. Let's see if I can pull this up. This has been a quote that has really stuck with me recently. And I'll say who it is afterwards. To be successful at anything, you don't have to be special. You just have to be what most people aren't. Consistent, determined, and willing to work for it. The person that said that is Tom Brady. Most people consider him the greatest quarterback of all time. If you don't know his story, he was actually drafted 199th in the NFL draft. Passed on by his own team, I believe 6 different times. But turned that into a desire to work hard and has won 7 Super Bowls, which is more than any other team has won. So be consistent. Don't think that you have to have the biggest and the best talent and skills of fundraising. Be consistent. Don't think that you have to have the most dynamic preaching style. Just be consistent. Don't think that you have to do all of these crazy things to get people to like you. Just be yourself and be consistent. On that note, I pray you have a great week. We'll talk next week. God bless.